Right, so it was predictable, but Benjamin Netanyahu has of course rejected the Hamas proposed ceasefire deal because he won't stop until total victory. But what does total victory look like, really? Beating Hamas? He's killed and injured almost 5% of the entire population of Gaza already. How many more are going to die for him in his aim to achieve that? Especially now almost the entire population of the Gaza Strip is crammed into Rafah, more densely populated than ever before, with no escape and nowhere to go. But even if he eliminates Hamas with whatever the civilian price that costs, it's a price we know he's happy to pay in both Palestinian lives and the lives of his own hostages. Why should anyone think that that is actually going to be the end? For Netanyahu to agree to peace is for him going to equal the end of his reign, because none of his hard-right coalition partners will agree to keep the coalition going unless Gaza is seized for Israel. Nothing less will satisfy the maniacs he's got into bed with. He'll never see power again thereafter. In fact, the inside of a prison cell looks more likely. So he cannot afford for this war to ever end. And if a wider escalation of violence in the Middle East is what it will take to stay in post, that's what he'll do. Who's going to stop him? Because right now nobody seems interested in dealing with the most unstable, unhinged element in the Middle East today, which is Netanyahu himself and his government. Right, so fundamentally the ceasefire deal proposed by Hamas has been dismissed by Netanyahu, not because it was unreasonable, but because he is. In the words of US politician Rashida Tlaib, when debating yet another aid package to Israel, which thankfully Congress binned off, no wonder Genocide Joe has avoided them 3 times already up till now, Netanyahu is a genocidal maniac. Who'd argue given the conduct of Israel over the last 4 months? We're sick of seeing the lifeless bodies of children all over social media, all for want of the world to get his act together and stop pandering to those doing the killing, let alone arming them as well. Hamas literally just offered a deal whereby there would be a ceasefire and a return of all the hostages they hold, and Netanyahu rejected it. I thought the whole point was to get the hostages back. It's actually that point which is destroying him most of all politically in Israel, because unlike him, most people in Israel actually place some value upon their own lives and the lives of their loved ones, and have gone to significant lengths to raise this point with other world leaders. Not their own, they've given up with him, but ones they hope can and will bring some pressure to bear. But of course that predicated on there being some global will to do that. Just in the last 24 hours, it is being reported that the families of hostages still being held in Gaza have met and spoken with the leaders of France, Spain, the UK, Qatar and Portugal, as a for instance, wasting their time with Sunak, but such is their plight and their desperation for a progressive way forward. This news of the ceasefire deal failing has come out overnight, as mediation talks between Hamas and Israel being conducted with the aid of Qatar and Egypt revealed that Hamas's proposal was for there to be a 135-day ceasefire, during which all hostages would be released in multiple stages, and in exchange Israel would pull out of Gaza, agree an end date on the war, and release the much greater number of Palestinian hostages they hold in their jails. Apparently the first 45-day phase of the ceasefire would see the release of all Israeli women hostages, men under 19, as well as the elderly and sick, in exchange for Palestinian women and children held in Israeli jails. This period would also include a withdrawal of Israeli troops from Gaza's most populated areas. The second phase would focus on the release of the remaining male hostages, together with a full Israeli military withdrawal from Gaza, as well as indirect talks for a permanent truce. The third phase would see the exchange of the remains of the dead. A source close to the negotiations apparently told Reuters that the Hamas proposal did not require a guarantee of a permanent ceasefire at the outset, but that an end to the war would have to be agreed before final hostages were freed. Hamas also wants guarantees that the ceasefire will be upheld. That's not an unreasonable thing to ask, is it? And not collapse as soon as hostages go free, because it's quite a big thing to ask for, isn't it really, since Israel repeatedly ignores such things. Unfortunately for Hamas and the families of their hostages, their existence means the lives of those hostages are a price worth paying, according to Netanyahu anyway, along with every innocent life in Gaza. That's the warped mind of Benjamin Netanyahu, who has said there is no other solution but total victory, and that surrendering to Hamas, his bizarre and delusional demands, not only won't lead to the release of hostages, but invites another massacre. Well, evidence indicates many of those who died on the night of October 7th in that supposed massacre probably died as a result of Israeli fire, not Hamas. And the week-long ceasefire observed in November saw 100 Israeli captives released. So his comments are nonsense, and Hamas are calling it as such, referring to his actions and his words as political bravado. Netanyahu said, If Hamas survives in Gaza, it's only a matter of time until the next massacre, and Iran's axis of evil, alongside its proxies, will continue this slaughter and aggression spree. Today, I told Secretary of State Blinken that after we destroy Hamas, we will ensure that Gaza will be demilitarized forever. The history has already shown that there is only one power which can ensure that demilitarization can happen, the State of Israel, through the IDF and our security forces. Sure, the trouble is the way the IDF and your security forces are conducting themselves, the way the State of Israel will ensure Gaza is demilitarized forever, is to leave nothing left alive. He had to drag Iran into this conversation as well, though, and herein lies the closest you'll find to anything resembling a nugget of truth and honesty in what he was saying, because in a not-so-subtle way, he will move on to the next enemy. There will be no end to the war. Even if he wipes Hamas out, the only way you will stop Gaza rising up again, because occupied people always will resist, it's their right, would be to take it over wholesale. His language is careful, though. It both implies he will take over Gaza and doesn't at the same time. And what I mean by that is it puts him in a position where he can reassure his coalition partners that that is still on the table as they want, whilst telling the US and others that he won't do that. It's not a game he can play forever, though, and his time in power has a clock on it, because I don't believe for one moment he'll be able to cobble together a coalition again. But let's say he does wipe out Hamas. He'll just move on to Hezbollah next in Lebanon, perhaps Syria. The point is, there will always be another enemy to deal with, another war to be had, another Iran proxy, another conflict, so this one actually never ends. Perhaps he'll dodge elections entirely and excuse that as being due to ongoing conflict. Whatever it takes to stay out of jail and stay in power, right? Who'd put it past him, would you? The point is, though, that the first duty of a government should be to its people, and therefore whatever it takes to get those hostages held in Gaza home should be the Israeli government's priority, should be Netanyahu's priority. But it blatantly isn't. His priority is himself. And it really is past time world leaders realise they're dealing with a despot in Israel and work towards a change in who is in charge so that some progressive sense of this ending can actually come about. The alternative is relying on Joe Biden to see sense, and for all sorts of reasons, that isn't ever going to happen. Additional funding to Israel being held up in Congress was welcome, but we need to see a lot more of that. These things shouldn't be coming to Congress at all, because they shouldn't be offering any more money, or arms, or whatever. It's annoying, though, because Biden could stop this overnight by cutting Israel off. Utterly reliant on the US for arms and funding, no matter how much Netanyahu's hard-right idiots attack the US as well. It's a fact. The knock-on effect would be Netanyahu brought down faster. His days are numbered. He's just using every military card in the deck to delay the inevitable. The deal Hamas put forward is exactly what the families of those Israeli hostages wanted to hear. But Netanyahu isn't listening. Frankly, nothing they offered would ever make him listen, and that's the truth of the matter. You can't negotiate with madmen, and sadly that is what is still being attempted right now, as more strikes on Rafah leave dozens more dead, and the same will continue day after day after day until something is done about him and the rest of this Israeli government, because until that is dealt with, there can be no peace and no end to what we're witnessing. It's little wonder, therefore, that aiding and abetting Netanyahu's regime is complicity in genocide, court case stuff, and now both the US and the UK can expect a day in the Hague themselves, in the uncomfortable shoes that Israel were in last month, as South Africa builds a big fat case against the pair of them for enabling this genocide to continue, for not cutting Israel off from arms and military aid. You can find out all about that news on this video here, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.